Hello everyone, we're just giving folks a few minutes to log in before we begin our webinar. Hello everyone, thank you all for finding the time to attend today's webinar. Our topic today is the cloud, why it's more than just network management. During this workshop, we will dive into the data insights that you can obtain from the cloud, helping you to advance IT and business operations and customer experience. Today's speakers are Perry Correll, Director of Product Management, and Alexandra Gates, Director of Product Marketing. A couple of items before we begin. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them at any time using the Q&A window. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If you have any difficulties during today's presentation, please try refreshing your browser. This webinar will be recorded and available to you in the next 24 hours. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Perry. Perry, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thank you very much, Mitch, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're connecting in from. As Mitch said, my name is Perry Correll, Director of Product Marketing at Extreme Networks. A lot of focus on the cloud and a lot of focus also on Wi-Fi. And I'll be doing part of the presentation, and joining me on my co-host will also be Alexandra Gates.
Thanks, Perry. So Alexandra, Director of Product Marketing as well, of course, with an emphasis on cloud and a big focus on cloud data and analytics moving forward as we build out our story in that realm. So jumping right into the content here today, networking has become a hurdle in some organizations. So a recent quote from Gartner that came out just a couple of months ago now in July of 2020 is that traditional network offerings are not suited to deliver reliable, agile, and cost-effective solutions in support of hybrid IT architectures. And I think that this was partially in response to how networking has changed so drastically, even this year in 2020, since COVID hit, the increase in the need for networking to stay connected from remote or more distributed sites, that's become even more essential than it ever has before. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of times, networking is not easy to implement, it's not easy to support, and it's not easy to manage. Oftentimes you'll have siloed products or offerings, things that you need to be on site to manage, or at least logging into multiple different systems to get into different components of your network. Sadly, slow innovation in some spaces related to networking, and of course, expensive to maintain. And you really want something that's simple, that's somewhat effortless, and that enables you to connect, to do your job, or to communicate with family or friends. Whatever it is, networking is so essential to our lives. And as an industry, we really need to come together to simplify this, streamline, make it easier to access for all organizations, regardless of size or of the size of your IT team, especially. And some of the networking trends that we've seen over the past couple of years have made this even more difficult to obtain. And that's the number of users that we're seeing that are connecting to networks. Even bigger is the amount of data that's being generated. So being able to support that data, but then being able to actually learn and grow from what you see in that data as well. And then of course, the number of actual devices is increasing exponentially. It's about 10 devices as many people as predicted by 2025, which is less than 5 years away now already. And budget, the amount of spend is increasing as well in order to address some of these trends that are coming up in the marketplace. But there are kind of differences between how you react or adapt to networking from more of an IT perspective, and then on the other hand, from a business perspective. So Perry, why don't you take us through kind of the traditional network management scheme that we're seeing?
Yeah, thanks. I hate to say it, but I've been involved in networking for about 30 years or so. And obviously, over that time period, your NMS, your network management systems have continued to evolve and they've got better and better. But for the most part, they're really designed to manage the network. Obviously, I want to manage all the devices. I want to see all the devices. I want to know, by devices, I mean your APs, your switches, that type stuff. For your clients, and obviously, as Alexandra just indicated, the client number and variety is exploding dynamically. It's just unbelievable how much it's going up. And then users, and it kind of, this is what, and upgrades, I got a new switch, or I got a new firmware, I got a new things, and then troubleshooting. This is what typically what network managers will do with the network, and onboarding and IP addressing and network analytics and network topology and all that stuff. But all this stuff is really information for the IT department, how to manage the network and how to make sure the network works. But actually, are there other uses for the network? How have we actually changed? And this is where we are today. And this is where at times to start thinking about, the network, getting away from the idea of the network that's just a piece of costly infrastructure, and think about what it can actually do for it, what it can drive your business. And that's an important thing to understand, because the network today isn't supposed to be just for the IT department. So think about it now. Think about if I can use the network, if I can use the data I get from the network to make my business more valuable. Think about it. What is, typically the CIO, the IT administrator, they're the ones that are looking at the NMS screens, but what type of information is gathered from the network that the CFO, the CMO, the CISO, the general manager, the security teams, the facilities person, the teachers, lecturers, on and on? Isn't there useful information in the network based on what's going on? That's an important thing to look about. We start talking about the amount of data in there. And if you just look at that data differently or display it differently, it becomes useful to other members of the organization. And once again, devices, density and contract tracing, I'll talk about that. Obviously, everybody's aware of that right now. And not just application uses, but business critical, application, how many people are watching, WebEx or whatever they're doing, but actually business critical applications, and make sure they work and give them priority over the others. And as I said before, there's non-IT people, analytics, non-IT staff, maybe in a hospitality environment. I want to know what rooms might need to be cleaned or have been cleaned, or where my staff is, or my security staff is. And that's very, very important, because the cloud now isn't just about network management. Yeah, we know we'll do that, but it's kind of like the internet. The internet isn't just about sending emails. I mean, that's really where it started out. And those are key functions for both of them. But there's so much more. The data in your cloud is valuable for network management. Yeah, we get that. Well, we've recently seen firsthand how critical it is to enabling businesses to reopen. Think about that. 6 months ago, nobody would have ever thought, okay, I got to know how many people are in and set thresholds, because I'm only allowed so many people in the business. Or theoretically, I've got an individual that was in the facility, and Maybe I need to find out where they went, and maybe I need to find out who was actually in contact with them. And so that's what changed a lot. It's not just about managing your switches and APs and your devices and how many people are you using applications. It's saying, can I take this data and display it in a different way? Display it a different way for hospitality, display it a different way for education, display it a different way for retail, display it a different way for a healthcare environment, and actually display it. What does a general manager want to look at? They don't care about IP addressing or how quickly an AP would roam or a client would roam from one AP to another. They're looking for density and movements and flow across the network and things that'll impact me, the security people, and be able to look at a glance and see where all their security teams are to get somebody to respond in an emergency. And that's the value of the network today. So if a lot of this can be done, theoretically, a lot of this can actually be done locally, on-prem type functionality. So why the cloud? What's the value of the cloud? And I think Alexandra will kind of tell you a little bit about that.
So we've identified quite a few benefits of cloud, both from a company perspective, but also as an industry, as you're talking to other competitors in the marketplace or organizations that are adopting cloud. These are kind of the 6 core tenets that keep coming up as why they would depend on cloud, whether that be for their entire network ecosystem or maybe the data and analytics side. You really can choose how cloud can best serve you, but starting kind of in the upper left-hand corner here with the simplicity. It does truly simplify the actual deployment of networks, but even more importantly, the ongoing support, the troubleshooting, the monitoring. The beauty of the cloud is you can do all of this remotely. So whether you have one office down the street or you have 10,000 around the world, you're able to log in to a pane of glass in an internet browser and have access to not only what all of your networks look like in those locations, but also what everyone's doing. As Perry mentioned, what's the data? Where are they located? What's the value of what they're doing in your locations? But getting up and running as well is a lot simpler. In clouds, you can oftentimes pre-provision networks. So before you've even deployed something, you can go in and you can set up a network policy, set up the rules for the users. You can ship out gear to a remote site, have someone plug it in to an Ethernet cable, and it's automatically going to pull down its configuration from the cloud, be up and running in a matter of minutes, so that you're able to do that in a more distributed fashion. You don't necessarily have to be on site rolling things out, configuring stuff, with a laptop connected to an access point or router. So the simplicity really is there, especially in the world of networking we're in today, that is essential. Moving over to the right, speed. This supports a couple different things. One is in relation to actually innovating. So new feature sets, new reports that you're going to roll out to your customers. Cloud enables continuous innovation, which means that the tool is going to be continuously available. However, you can give updates into the cloud or push out new feature sets without interrupting service. And the beauty of the cloud in particular architectures is that the cloud vendor and the cloud management platform runs completely independent from your network. So when a cloud vendor pushes out an update with 10 new features, that doesn't affect any of your networks on the ground. You can choose to utilize something that came out or not, but it's not going to be a pushed firmware update or change to your configuration on site. The speed also has to do with things like bug fixes. Let's say there is a bug in the cloud management platform. You're able to rapidly detect, but also alleviate or fix that problem a lot more rapidly in the cloud. You don't have to wait 6 months or 3 months for a fix to come out, download a file, and then you're up and running. It's going to happen instantaneously. One of the other benefits of speed here is, Perry mentioned the term contact tracing, for example. There's been a lot of interest in contact tracing or occupancy management. We're able to react to what the customers are asking for and implement new features directly into the cloud in response to that. And again, that's going to happen a lot more seamlessly, but a lot faster than with a traditional on-prem or hardware type deployment. Over to the right, service. This is talking more about APIs or integrations. And again, another beauty of the cloud and the architecture beneath it is that typically it's built on a fully open API platform that can integrate with other services, insights, or tools that an organization might already be using. If there's an API plugin or an API tie, you can actually integrate those systems together. You can also use the APIs to pull data out of the cloud and feed it into another tool that you might be using. Again, a key example of this is contact tracing. You can funnel data out of the cloud in terms of where the users were located, how much data they were using, who they might have interacted with, and you can actually feed that into an actual contact tracing application, and that's the raw data that it's utilizing to create its outputs. Moving on from there, scale. I mentioned, maybe you have a single site with a couple access points, a router, and a switch, but we also have customers with hundreds of thousands of infrastructure devices. It doesn't matter with the cloud. You're not limited to a certain number. You don't hit 500, for example, and then need to buy another cloud. The cloud is infinitely scalable. It grows with you, it adapts with you. And that's not only on an increasing scale, but also if you need to pull back operations, the cloud is able to do that as well. Moving over now, security. When cloud was first introduced 10, 12 years ago, it wasn't known as the most secure management platform out there. However, there's been huge strides in terms of client data and data privacy with relation to the cloud. I think we'll talk about in a couple slides, but there's some ISO certifications ensuring security, both from the infrastructure providers, but also the cloud management applications that are sitting on top of that. So ensuring that your data is secure, you only have access to it, and also making sure that it's robust and you'll have access to that data for the duration you need in a secure manner. And then the last point here on this slide, we've labeled it SMART, which is a very broad category, but this is where you get into the idea of data storage, AI, ML type tendencies, the feature velocity, so learning from the data that we're collecting, and then also creating the foundations for self-learning features and self-learning tools. So as we collect more and more data and we gain intelligence from that data, the network management platform is going to get smarter, but also that's where you're going to start deriving those benefits that Perry mentioned from a business perspective as well. So these benefits aren't all necessarily for IT teams, but it also can be for the general manager that needs to know what's going on, or for the facilities manager that needs to be able to track flow of users or traffic through the organization. So again, some of the benefits here. However, it is important to have the right infrastructure in place to actually realize or recognize those benefits. And Perry's going to take us through the differences here.
The world's changed over the last 6 months. I think everybody knows that, and most people are sitting at home or wherever they're working from now. And the reason I mention that is because if we were at a conference right now, if we were doing a live seminar and an event, and we had hundreds or thousands of booths, I guarantee you that every one of those networking booths would say cloud, because everybody has a cloud solution. Everybody has at least a cloud message, but that doesn't necessarily mean all of this is the same. It's dependent on your age and whatever. Your first email account might have been through AOL. And now obviously there's a lot of better options, a lot of different capabilities. And cloud is actually very, very similar to that. Is that just because I say I have a cloud, or I'm cloud enabled, or I have some cloud functionality, it doesn't mean everything's the same. Alexandra just talked a lot about what a cloud can do, but it doesn't necessarily mean all clouds can do that. So it's important to understand how the cloud architecture has evolved over about the last 13, 14 years or so. And because that kind of gives you a better idea of what the functionality is available out there and what you should expect, what you should demand. And this going through this evolution here, you have first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation. This is kind of a commonly accepted values. It's not like the IEEE wrote a standard on what's a first or second generation cloud, but it's important to understand the functionalities and the capabilities before this. First generation cloud appeared probably 13, 14 years ago. And essentially all it was, and one of the common names was, is somebody else's data center. The whole idea is I'll have a piece of software, I'll have my network management software, and instead of running it on a VM or on a platform in my own site, I will offload it to a vendor whose job it is actually to provide a little bit better reliability, because that's all they're focusing on. Gives me a little bit more flexibility and cost savings. Typically single tenant, I can only manage one person's device, but it's very basic and some functionality enhanced. The next level was second generation. Second generation, you started to get into something called microservices. Now, I'm not going to get down into the weeds on that because most people don't really care about that, to be honest. But the idea behind microservices, instead of taking the first generation, had this one monolithic piece of software. And if anything went wrong, the whole thing failed and my network went down. So what they started to do is, I'm going to take that big piece of software and I'm going to break it up into different pieces. And that way, but they're still going to be tightly integrated, but it allows me to do some improvements and some upgrades, gives me a little bit better resiliency. I can get some more analytics. I can actually support multi-tenant environments, support multiple customers on a single platform, and actually a little bit better security. Security more as reliability than necessarily, security type functionality. Where the big change came in what we refer to as a third generation cloud. The third generation cloud got into much more into microservices. Instead of taking the second generation took the one piece of software and broke it up into tightly integrated sections. This actually takes the management software and breaks it up into dozens or hundreds of loosely integrated sections. And the advantage of loosely integrated means that if I lose one, I don't lose the entire network. So if I just lose one piece of the functionality, the network continues to operate without going down. The other thing, because I broke those out, and Alexandra kind of mentioned that before, it's much easier to add new functionality, something we call continuous integration. If you think about how any piece of software works or any piece of firmware works, we all work in a network environment, and every vendor out there has new releases, so like, come November, release 4.8.6 that whatever will come out, and this is the feature set that's going to be in it. And that's typically the way everything's been going on for 50 years or so. What changes with this is now the ability to, if I've got 10 or 12 or 15 different features in that one release, what about I just release the features when they're ready? So I don't have to wait for all this to happen. If feature number 1 is ready, it's gone through QA, the software engineer got it, I just roll it in the production network. If feature 3 is ready before feature 1, if feature 7, so I've got these individual engineers working on this, and whatever it's ready, it rolls out. So what happens, and as Alexandra had mentioned before, is you'll log into your network someday and there'll be a new feature up there, and it might be it's a new way to look at the data. I'm not pushing firmware out to your switches or your APs or your routers. What I'm doing is maybe adding a new tab into your management screen. So it gives you a lot more functionality, a lot more capability that you can use or not use if you want. And then you get up to the current level, the current generation of products out there, what we refer as fourth generation, is fully containerized microservices. You'll hear containers and you'll hear Kubernetes and you'll hear all this stuff. You'll hear all the reliability. But what that does, it actually gives you, you always hear about all these 5 nines, 6 nines, 7 9, 8 nines. It actually gives you almost a 0 because it becomes so reliable because no one piece of code can take anything down. But what's even more important is the containerized microservices. And what those containers allow me to do is put this piece of software wherever I want. Now, if I want it in a public cloud, if I want it in Amazon, if I want it in Google, if I want it in Azure, it's fine. I can plug it right in there. I can move it. If I want to put it in my own private instance, I'm a large organization, I'm an MSP, and I already have an Amazon instance. I can actually take this and put it in your instance. And then what gets a little bit confusing to people is I can actually put it on-prem. If I have a container platform hardware, I can actually take this same cloud application and put it locally. So once again, that's what the containerized allows me to do, is at any place that'll support a container, I can move this functionality into it. And actually it separates it out, gives me tremendous amount of reliability, and obviously scalability that's kind of unlimited as far as that, and also dynamic capacity. Once again, you just spin up more microservices as you need more functionality. The other thing about, the cloud, and, a lot of times you don't necessarily think about this. People look at, well, a cloud on-prem, I can do some similar type functionality. What's the big buzzwords out there right now? What's everybody talking about? Everybody's talking about AI and ML and analytics and insights and all that stuff. So if I got all this data and if I can run it through my machine learning and throw some AI on top of it, it's going to generate some analytics. And with that analytics, it'll give me insights and I can theoretically address my network needs better. I can actually automate some type functionalities. But the challenge is there is the data. I need enormous amounts of data. If I've got 50 data points and I'm trying to do some AI, it's not going to be very useful. But if I've got 5 billion data points, if I've got petabytes worth of data, then I can actually do some real AI, real machine learning. And actually, the more data I can have, the smarter, the better decisions I can make. The problem with that, I shouldn't say problem, the limitation on that is it takes an enormous amount of space. Yes, let's just be honest. I could have some very expensive network attached storage and I can have petabytes and all this type of on locally. But the better thing is actually to put it in the cloud, because cloud is unlimited scalability. So as I get more data in, it expands to fill that need. So the whole idea is that the more data, I have data and I organize the data, becomes information. I learn from this information, then becomes knowledge. I apply the information, it becomes intelligence. And this is really what it's all about. And this is what helps us make decisions going forward. This is going to be the big thing going forward. And it's important to understand that, you know, everybody's using AI and ML almost as buzzwords, but what it is, if you go back, once again, depends how old you are. If you go back 20 or 30 years or whatever, when networking was in its infancy, you know, DHCP was neat. DNS was a new thing, and then VLANs and all this type functionality. This is the next iteration that I'm giving you tools. AI is not going to take over your network, but it's going to be a tool that you can use to enhance your network operation. That being said.
All right. So far we've been talking kind of about general networking trends, things we've seen in the industry related to cloud, specifically talking about some of the architecture and infrastructure components. Now we're going to shift and focus a little bit more on Extreme's cloud solution, which is led with Extreme Cloud IQ. So Perry alluded to some of these feature sets on the last slide, but we want to talk about kind of what really makes Extreme Cloud different from other solutions on the marketplace first. Once we've established that, then really jump into the actual data analytics and what we're providing with that data. We'll actually give you a real look inside the tool and show off some of those capabilities in real time in just a couple minutes here. So with Extreme Cloud IQ, kind of starting at the top of this chart, Perry mentioned before, when you have containerized microservices, it doesn't matter what type of platform you as the customer want to deploy this application on. So we are cloud agnostic in the fact that we can deploy Extreme Cloud IQ on Microsoft. We can deploy it on AWS. We can deploy it on Google. We can deploy it in a container that you can host yourself or you can host on site. So really the opportunities are endless. And you might be asking, you know, why would I want to deploy on one versus the other? An example would be maybe one of our retail customers. They see Amazon as a competitor. They don't want to fund them even from a cloud infrastructure perspective. So maybe they're going to choose Google. Or maybe someone has a contract with Microsoft and they want to deploy this cloud application in Microsoft. That's totally fine. And again, that's one of the benefits of that flexibility is you can actually choose how to deploy this application and how it's going to work best for your organization. Then below that is deployment agnostic. So again, because we have this 4th generation, highly robust, but also flexible architecture, customers can choose between deploying in the public cloud, which is kind of the most hands-off deployment. We handle everything in one of those cloud platforms. We update everything. We make sure it's ready for you on a daily basis, 24/7 to log into. There's also a private cloud. And that's kind of a gated off iteration in the cloud. It's not hosted on, you know, one of the broader platforms or portfolios. You would be able to keep that separate for your deployment. And then also you can download this as an OVA file and host it on site or on premises. The feature sets are very similar across all of the deployment methods, but again, we let you choose something that's going to work best for your organizational needs and requirements. And then down below, device agnostic, that's more related to licensing. So you can see on the left-hand side, we have what's called a pilot's license. I'll hand off to Perry in a couple slides here. He can talk about some of the different tiers we have. But the nice thing is whatever tier you choose, it doesn't matter what you're deploying your licenses on. So they're not tied to a particular serial number of an access point. And when you want to upgrade that access point, you don't need to buy a new license. They're actually portable across APs, switches, and routers. And if you have any time left on that license, if you want to move from 802.11 AC to AX, you can upgrade your hardware and your licenses will actually move with you. So again, we want to make this simple. We want to make it portable. We want to make it extensible, reliable, and easy for you to deploy and maintain moving forward. And then we talked about data. We talked about those buzzwords of ML and AI. And what we're really focused on right now with Extreme Cloud IQ is building that network baseline. So we're collecting data in the cloud. Of course, it's anonymous data. We're not tying any identifying information based on where the customer is located or what their users are doing. But we're able to collect, again, anonymously, all of this data, the billions of data points. And we're starting to implement some machine learning type principles in some of our tools. You can see built out here, things like Client 360, Client Monitor, Network 360. And I'm not going to talk much about them now because I'd actually rather show you them real time in the cloud. But we're creating the baseline of what's normal and what's not, being able to detect anomalies with the goal of having Extreme Cloud IQ be able to self-heal and self-learn in the future, taking some of those day-to-day mundane tasks out of the hands of network administrators and allowing the management application to actually fix those problems for you. Or alternatively, being able to alert someone in the business side, maybe if there's a peak in users, maybe they need to send out more representatives into their organization to deal with those users. So a lot of different ways that you can interact with and adapt to the data that's moving through the cloud. And of course, as Perry mentioned, the amount of data, the quantity of data that is being funneled through these machines, these analytics processors, is very, very important. So I wanted to give you just a brief look at what we're doing in the cloud in terms of the data points. We have 100,000 virtual IQ containers in the cloud right now, so individual customers, and we're roughly adding 30,000 devices every 30 days. So that means we're adding access points, routers, or switches, about 1,000 a day, and that's only increasing as more people are starting to adapt to the cloud and deploy that in their organizations. We typically see about 5 terabytes daily of traffic moving across those infrastructure devices. Remember, there's a difference between infrastructure devices and clients. Those are going to be a lot higher. And typically seeing about 5 billion information elements analyzed daily. So again, we're able to gather that data, we're able to process it, learn from it, create knowledge, create intelligence, and that's where we're kind of moving towards with that artificial intelligence play. And we do have some different tiers, and we are actually also proud of the fact that we do have a free offering for people to kind of get their toe, dip it in, see if cloud is something for you. And Perry's going to take us through what those different tiers look like.
All right, thank you. As Alexandra and I said several times throughout this presentation, one of the things that the cloud offers, and obviously Extreme Cloud IQ also offers, is flexibility. Let's just be honest, everybody doesn't need the exact same thing. Everybody's network is different. Everybody's needs are different. So we offer different options and actually different futures as far as is concerned. So as Alexandra said, we actually offer a free option. So yeah, let's say you listen to everything we say and you're going to see the demo that Alexandra's about ready to do, and you say, you know, that's really, really cool, but I don't know if I'm ready to pay for anything yet. We actually offer what we call Connect. It's a free option. And the nice thing about this free option is it's different than anybody else's. And I know you've heard that before, and we have marketing on our title, so you kind of worry about that. But the difference is this isn't 30 days. This isn't 30 months. This is as long as you have it. It's very, very easy to set this up. You go to our website, you basically put in your name, put in an email address, and you can set up an account. It's not like we have to send you a license or anything like that. You could set up yourself. And once you set that up, you have that account as long as you want to use that account. We're not going to time out after 90 days or whatever. And also pretty much you can put as many devices as you want in there. So access points, switches, routers, device onboarding, plug and play, guided configuration, centralized Wi-Fi planner, monitoring tools, essential security, all the, yes, it doesn't have all the functionalities of the Extreme Cloud IQ Pilot, which we'll talk about. Pretty much what it's missing is all the analytic type stuff, but it will, the smart analytics, it will show you the traffic on your network and all that type stuff. But it's 100% free. It gives you this functionality and a lot of capabilities. The next step up is actually kind of a recent tier. It's what we call Navigator. We have obviously the Extreme Network acquired the Wing portfolio, the Motorola portfolio, and those products are a little bit different. So they don't work, typically they're designed to work with an on-prem controller, but we wanted to interface them into the cloud. And so single pane of glass, so I can actually see my cloud managed stuff, and I can see my on-prem management stuff from one place. So that's also an option. And then the next one, the common one, the default subscription service is what we call Extreme Cloud IQ Pilot. And once again, as was mentioned earlier, you can deploy it in a public cloud, a private cloud, local cloud, everything in it has plus advanced tools. So you have advanced topology view, where instead of just looking at all your devices, you can actually automatically see how they're tied together. Troubleshooting heuristics, contextualized optimization. Alexandra talked about 360. We have network 360, we have security 360, we have application 360, we have device 360. And what it does is it drills down into individual devices or individual network components and actually gives you a much better look of what that device is not just doing, but also capable of. Good example of that is like 11AX, Wi-Fi 6 type technology, is that most vendors, if I've got a brand new smartphone that's 11AX capable and is connected to an 11AC or 11NAP, it won't tell you that that device is 11AX capable. We actually will, because that's a handshake discussion that goes on. So it gives you an idea, maybe when it's time to upgrade your network or what it looks like. And also it gives you a comparative analysis tool. Once again, if you want to use this, let's say you design your network and you're a healthcare environment and you've got 500 APs and you go, my network's pretty good, but how do I know how the operation of my network and the performance of my network compares to similar environments? You have the right to actually compare it. Once again, it's all hidden. It's just analytic data. You don't know who they are. They don't know who you are. But across the industry, how do I compare it with similar market with a similar size network? So once again, extremely, extremely useful. The next tier that's coming very, very soon is something we call Copilot. What Copilot does is it ties AI together with our GTAC, our tech support services, and we'll be able to monitor your network. And if we detect an issue, once again, AI and ML is just about monitoring data, billions and billions of points of data over as long a period as you want. What that does is it'll alert our GTAC, our tech support, and they can actually reach up to you and say, hey, we're not talking about an AP fails. That's obvious. We're talking about something less obvious, that we're detecting a trend in your network that maybe you wouldn't notice, and we'll give you a holler and say, hey, this is something that we might be able to resolve, or you want to think about dealing with. Automated RMAs that we can automatically set this up. The idea behind this is, let's say you've got a trouble with your network. Let's say you've got an AP that's kind of acting funny. It's not broke, but it's doing some strange things. And typically if you call tech support and they'll say, okay, well, what's your contract number? What's the serial number of the AP? What's its IP address? What the firmware is it's running? Can you do the configuration? Can you send me a data capture? What this does is, because I'm already monitoring that, as soon as you identify, hey, I've got a concern about this, it automatically gathers this information instantly and makes it available to our GTAC. So once again, that's kind of where that fits. And then obviously Extreme Cloud IQ Autopilot is kind of the next generation. This is where you get to the point, advanced, actionable, autonomous AI, that I want to set thresholds on my network. This is how I want it to perform. This is how I want it to operate. These are the applications that I want to make sure get this certain level of quality of service. And what they'll do is allow the network to automatically make changes if you allow it. Once again, you're always going to have control over this, never going to take over for you, but it gives you a much, much higher level of service. One of the other things that I don't think we talked about before is the data. We've talked a lot about the data, and one of the things that we do is, how much data should you have? Should you have 30 days worth of data, 90 days worth of data, a year worth of data? What we're launching now, we typically had 90 days worth of data or a year 13 months, depending on the market, we're actually launching unlimited data, which means from the day you joined our cloud, from the day you got in, we'll capture all that data as far back. So obviously it's easy in retail to compare last year and this year, but you can go back even further now. One of the exciting things right now is something called Extreme Cloud IQ and what we call essential services. Earlier, Alexandra talked about continuous integration or continuous services or microservices offer some functionality. So for the longest time, Extreme and every vendor out there has a bunch of additional services that they typically sell you subscriptions for, sell you licenses for. Air defense, WIPS is one of them. Location service is one of them. Guest service is one of them. IoT management services is one of them. And the idea is that once you get the management application, you will buy these add-ons. Well, we kind of took a different step to that. We decided that those applications are essential to the network operation. So if you're an IT manager and you've got a limited budget, sometimes it's like, well, maybe I got enough money for the WIPS, but maybe next year I'll do the location services or I'll do IoT. What we decided is those are default. Those are stuff that should be automatic. So starting actually this month, we're launching what's called Extreme Cloud IQ Essentials, which these are new features, air defense or WIPS, location, guest, and IoT, that are free, that become default. And because continuous integration, the air defense is the first one we're launching. As I said, that's launching in the next week or so. You're going to log into your screen one day. The next time you log into Pilot, there's going to be a new tab there, and it's going to say air defense. Once again, we're not touching your network. We're just adding you new tools. And 3 or 4 weeks from now, we're going to add location services. Once again, that tab is just going to show up. And then Extreme Guest and Extreme IoT. And once again, as the name says, these we consider essential services. You shouldn't have to decide how much money you have and which one you're going to get. All this is available. A lot of times people think of, location services, I only really need that maybe in retail or whatever. But if you think about it, think of any enterprise, it'd be a good idea to be able to locate devices or groups of devices based on almost any type of information, or actually see flows across the network. So once again, it's what we call essentials. It's part of the default pilot program. If you're buying the Extreme Cloud IQ pilot for the first time, it'll automatically come along with it. If you're an existing customer, these features will automatically show up at no additional cost, nothing to do, just click on them and start using them. So once again, that's pretty cool. That being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Alexandra so she can kind of show you what this all looks like live.
All right, so I'm going to jump out of the slides, move over to the cloud platform. We talked too long, so I got logged out, but this will actually show you how easy it is to get into the cloud. If you're a customer, you'll typically have probably one account for all of your locations. It would show up on the right-hand side. If you're a partner, you're managing lots of different customers. This is actually the same way you'd be able to interact with the different customer accounts. So I'm going to jump into one of our retail networks right now to show off some of the features. And this is supposed to be just a very quick preview, kind of a teaser of some of those features. If you're interested in seeing a longer demo, we do have a weekly Wireless Wednesday webinar where you'll get a longer 15 to 20-minute demo of the cloud. But I did want to start under our Insights tab in Network 360. I alluded to this one on one of my slides back there. But this is a really great place to get a high-level overview of what's happening in your network. I have health scores across the top, broken out into different network categories. Below, I can tie this to an individual location. So you'll see I went from that global view pretty quickly down into one of my stores. And the data actually dynamically updates based on what location I've drilled into as far as my location filters on the left-hand side. And here, some of the cool things you can see is currently where users are connected based on your access points. I can look at that even over time. So you'll see, we call these blooms as people are moving throughout the facility. This is really great for those occupancy management or facility management individuals that need to see where individuals are. I can click on one of these access points and get a detailed look at exactly who's connected, their health score of the device. Same thing, I can see the data down below. So lots of different ways that you can both organize the data and also interact with it from this system. If I click on clients, I can get a more detailed view at any of these widgets that are giving me a health score. I see some of the algorithms that we're doing in the back end to actually create that health score. And then I can also see things like those client capabilities that Perry mentioned. Once you see maybe some AX devices starting to pop up, you'd want to upgrade your infrastructure. So a really great way to level set for IT to see if they're serving their client population appropriately. Really just a wealth of data available from these different widgets on the application screen. This one, for example, application health, I can see exactly what apps are being utilized in my facility, how much data is being consumed, and then maybe based on what I see here, I can actually create some rules in my network policies to maybe slow some of those applications down if I don't want them hogging my network, or prioritizing more productivity focused apps in my organization if I want people focusing more on their job and not, streaming social media or streaming services, Netflix and Hulu. So drilling back into this Network 360 screen here, I wanted to show you an example of one of our other tools, and that is Client 360. So I opened up James as an example. Left-hand side, I can see some information about his current connection status, how long he's been connected, where exactly he's located in the facility. And then the right-hand side on the top, I get a really nice topology of what AP he's connected to, the switch, router, looks like he's VPN'd back into a head-end location. And down below, more detailed information about his connectivity. So usage, RSSI, noise floor over time. I can get session details. I can actually compare some of his network benchmarks to other people near him. So those comparative analytics that Perry mentioned, we can do this from a device perspective or client perspective or across the entire network. And depending on what I click on, again, that data is going to dynamically update based on where I want to look. I can also look at roaming history, again, color coded to see if everything's going well or if I need to make some changes. I can look at the applications that an individual is running within the network. So really a wealth of data, and we're trying to display it in a way that we think is most powerful to the users, both from an IT perspective, but also from a business perspective. One other thing I wanted to show on the managed side, this is a really great way to track exactly who's in your facility. This is devices, so that's more infrastructure, but from a client perspective, this would be one of those great places to get details on occupancy management. I have a wealth of filters I can set up on the left-hand side based on locations, device types, even network policies. I can see real-time data as you see here, or go back and look at historical data. Now I can actually change the time range depending on how much data I want to access. And right now we have 90 days accessible for existing customers. Net new customers get that unlimited data that Perry mentioned. So we're upgrading all of the infrastructure, the amount of data that you can access to make it even more powerful for you as a user. And then the last thing I want to show you, just because we are again trying to keep this brief, is kind of this cloud view. You saw a screenshot of this earlier. This is an anonymous kind of snapshot of some of our deployments worldwide. Look at our management events that we're tracking, device updates, even devices that are being managed under some of our different regional data centers. So a great way to see exactly what type of data we're gathering and what we're utilizing that data for. So I'm going to jump out of the slides, move back over to our PowerPoint presentation, and we have a couple more slides and then we'll get to some questions. So Perry, they were looking at that. They loved all of the tools I showed off, but they don't necessarily want something in the cloud, or they want to create more of a unique deployment method. Can you explain how we're able to do that, how all of these systems kind of interconnect?
Yeah, go ahead and share the presentation again.
Let's see.
We're all getting real good at Zoom, so there it comes. Before we go into that, one of the things I want to point out that Alexandra mentioned before is she said something about you can identify the health of a client and then also compare it to clients nearby. And sometimes the value of that is really missed. So if you think about it, if I've got a client having an issue, either I detect they're having an issue or they detect they're having an issue. If I can actually go in there and say, you know something, everybody around them, everybody connected around that same APs is having that same problem, well, then maybe it's a problem with the AP, or maybe it's just an issue because there's too many people associated on one AP and it's a bandwidth issue. And obviously that becomes a device issue or an infrastructure thing that I need to resolve. But if it's only that one device having the problem and other devices nearby don't, then chances are it's probably that device. So once again, it's a quick way to actually figure out where the problem is. And to Alexandra's point, you know, it's like we've talked a lot about cloud. As a matter of fact, this whole presentation is about cloud. But there are some people, for whatever reasons, preference, regulatory requirements, that they can't use cloud, or they don't want to use cloud, or whatever. So it's very important to understand that even though Extreme has a strong cloud belief, we also have just a strong on-prem type solution. So once again, be aware that, yeah, we're talking a lot about cloud, but we're saying have this functionality on-prem also, and it's very, very important to appreciate that. So I can have a fully cloud managed solution, or I can have a fully on-prem solution, or I can have a hybrid. Maybe I like an on-prem solution. I want all the control, all the management locally, and I want to be able to look at it right there. But maybe I want some of this Network 360, Client 360, analytics stuff that really only becomes available when I have a tremendous amount of data. So once again, it's the flexibility thing. It's the choice thing. It's really whatever you want. So at the top level, we have Extreme Cloud IQ. So we have that functionality, once again, public, private, on-prem, hybrid, whichever you want. We have all the regular network management functionality, plus the visibility, the analytics, configuration, access control, APIs automation. And let's not forget everything we just mentioned before, the essential services that you get: WIPs, wireless intrusion prevention services, you get guest services, you get location services, you get IoT management service as part of the package. It's not something that you have to pay extra for. It's not something they have to configure APIs to work together. It's already there. And why that's important? Because they're using the same database. And the four things I talked about, they're interrelated, they tie together. So instead of trying to take multiple applications and force them to work together, they're actually using the same data from the same database. They're just displaying the information a little bit differently. And then the other thing, at the very top of the slide, end-to-end cloud management. Let's just be honest, cloud management really started focusing for the most part on APs. And there's a lot of solutions out there that are really AP focused, and maybe some switches too. We're end to end. So pretty much from, you know, the latest Wi-Fi 6 access points to your edge switches, to your campus switches, to even actually into the core type functionality, Fabric Connect, hyper secure environment. Once again, it all ties together. You know, obviously single pane of glass is kind of an overused term this way, but I have one point of view to look at my entire network, everything they are. So once again, great solution, and you get as much cloud as you want. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Alexander to wrap us up.
Yeah, so last slide here, and then we're going to try to get to some questions in the last few minutes that we have up at the end of the hour. But just wanted to reiterate some of those, again, differentiating feature sets of Extreme's modern, robust cloud in Extreme Cloud IQ. First of which is availability. So we hit, I think now we're at 16 months uptime of availability. So that means that we haven't even had 10 seconds of downtime. The cloud is always available for our customers when they need it. Again, we have that continuous integration, continuous delivery. I'm actually sad because I think in 2 days, my regional data center would have been updated with air defense. So I could have actually shown you that in real time, that essential application that just got containerized, it would show up in the cloud. So things are really happening that rapidly. And then in terms of durability, you know, we're processing those millions of bits of data every day. We're not going to lose those, both from a broader perspective, but then down to our individual customer levels. You're always going to have access to that data. You're always going to be able to utilize that, even export it through those reports or the APIs we talked about earlier. And then touching again on duration. When I was in the system right now, I showed you that 90-day perspective. We're working on the unlimited view for existing customers. Of course, net new customers, you're going to start out in that unlimited view. So as you acquire data and as you move through the system, it gets more mature. you will always have access to that historical data and the real-time information that's actually happening live in your environment. And then security. So we did touch on that. I did want to point out Extreme is actually the only independent cloud vendor that has achieved ISO 27001 certification. So we just want to reemphasize the fact that we do take data privacy extremely seriously. We were able to achieve that from a vendor perspective, which is very difficult. It took a long time, but we want to make sure that our customers' data and all of the information that's traversing through the cloud is secure at all times, and the privacy factor as well. So Mitch, I did see some questions coming in as we were talking. If we can try to address maybe 5 or 6 very rapidly before we run out of time.
Thank you, Alexandra. We'll go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just as a reminder, please be sure to type your questions using the Q&A window. And the first question we have on the line is, how much is it per year for the unlimited data feature?
So I'll take that one since I was just talking about it. Might even be a surprising answer. It's free. We're not charging extra for the unlimited data. We think that allowing you to access that and all of the insights you're going to gain is so valuable, but we want to make that accessible for all of our customers. So we're offering that free of charge.
Perfect. And the next question we have is, do you share customer data with anyone else?
I'll grab that. Mitch, one of the things that people get confused about sometimes is about the cloud and thinking that user data goes through the cloud. What's going up to the cloud is analytics and statistics and metadata of the amount of traffic I'm seeing going across the network, not the actual traffic. So if you're sending an email to your boss or whatever, that's not going into the cloud. The cloud is at a band. It's monitoring this type stuff. So we don't gather user statistics, and we don't even the analytics, so we're not going to share that with anybody else either. And if one of the things on the very last slide, it actually mentioned GDPR. We actually fully support that, and we have multiple regional data centers throughout the world. So depending on where you're located at, your analytic data actually stays local and obviously GDPR compliant, which means I can delete any personal identifier information if it even is in the cloud. So once again, no, we don't take the actual user data into the cloud, and no, we wouldn't share the analytics with anybody else.
Perfect. And the next question we have is, what devices can you manage from the cloud?
Take that one. I jumped into the Manage Devices tab very, very briefly, but we have a variety of access points, routers, and switches, both from the AeroHive product line, which is where Extreme Cloud IQ came from. It was formerly Hive Manager NG, morphed into Extreme Cloud IQ, been upgraded over the last 14 months now since Extreme acquired AeroHive. So the AeroHive devices, and then now over again those last 14 months, we've been integrating Extreme portfolios into the platform as well. So we have XOS switches, VOS, Wing devices from an access point perspective, some SD-WAN routers, and those are actually going to keep increasing as we keep building out the portfolio. We also can manage a couple Dell switches as well. So across those 3 vendors, I think we have 70 devices, different types of devices we can manage, and we can provide that list as well.
Perfect. And the next question we have is, can I try this product out for free?
Yes, Perry. We actually, I mentioned that actually on my slide. So if you actually go and purchase an Extreme product, access point switch or whatever it happens to be, and you don't want to do the subscription for the pilot, you can use the Connect tier. That was the first tier I talked about. Once again, you get all the management, the profiles, the deployment, and be able to monitor these type devices. Don't have the full analytics associated with it, but once again, it's free. You can use it free for as long as you want. Once again, there's not a 30-day limit on it, and pretty much unlimited as far as devices.
Perfect. And the next question we have is, how do I migrate from the free version to the subscription version?
Yeah, good lead in from the last one. So once you actually register for that free account, which again is super easy, enter your email, your name, walk through the process, you'll see in Extreme Cloud IQ Connect, there's a bunch of buttons that say upgrade now. So very easy, you can click on it, enter your information to move up to the pilot system, and your policies and your data that's in the Connect system will actually move with you. So there is a pretty seamless process, and you'll see all of those highlighted buttons in there asking you if you want to upgrade.
Perfect. And the next question we have is, are there any size limits for how many devices or clients I can support in the cloud?
I can take that one as well. So basically, no, there's no size limits. As I mentioned, we have customers with 3 APs, and then we have customers with 3 million access points, routers, switches. Because we use a mix of global and regional data centers, we can expand those as much as we need to the increasing demand. And we can even set up a new regional data center in a matter of like 15 to 20 minutes. So no, we do not have any size limits.
Perfect. And this will be the last one because we're running out of time here. So what if I decide not to renew my cloud account?
I'll do that one. We don't know because nobody's ever not renewed it. No, only kidding on that. But if you decide that, for whatever reason, financially or whatever, that you set up your network, everything's working fine, but you decide, I don't want to renew it for the next, everything continues to operate. There are some vendors out there, if you don't renew, everything shuts down. Our network continues to operate, all the configurations you set, everything happens. You just can't make changes anymore through the cloud. You can't gather any more statistics through the cloud. I mean, you could use a CLI, you can go in SSH and do all that stuff. But no, your network continues to operate based on the last configuration you made, essentially indefinitely.
Perfect. And unfortunately, it does look like we're running out of time. There were a lot of other questions asked, so we'll make sure to have someone contact you directly to get those questions answered. Thank you again for your time and your participation in today's webinar. You will receive a follow-up email within the next 24 hours with a link to the on-demand recording. Thank you and have a great day.